low mood. You're going to be a little bit down if you're having issues with debt and it's overwhelming in your life. But then he said also that some actually had diagnosed mental health conditions. Now, one thing I can tell you is this. I can tell you from experience, debt can make you feel anxious. Anybody experienced that in your life before? You know, and especially if you don't have any support. Especially if you know there's more month than there is money. You know, and we've all heard that terminology before. When we just don't have what it takes to make it. Now, debt can also, it can be a considerable burden, which is made worse many times in dealing with it on all alone. Worrying about debt can affect your sleep. How many's ever lost any sleep over worrying about some financial situations in your life? Anybody ever been there? You know, losing out on a good night's sleep can also affect our mood. It can affect our energy levels. It can also affect our ability to work and have good relationships with our friends or with our family. So in other words, if we have a debt issue in life, and I'm talking about a financial debt issue in our life, it can affect more than just the financial area of our life. It affects relationships. It affects our health. It affects so many different things in our life if we're not careful. So all of these things can further add to your debt problem. And all that to say this is that debt can be a very real mental, emotional, and physical weight that we carry around with us. Now that's on the physical debt side, but what about spiritual debt? We're going to talk a little bit about that spiritual debt today. Luke chapter 23, and this is the passage we're going to be unwrapping today. Verse 33 it says, "And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, 'Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.' And they cast lots to divide his garments. And the people stood by watching, but the ruler scoffed at him, saying, 'He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, his chosen one.' And the soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, 'If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself.' And there was also an inscription over him, 'This is the King of the Jews.' One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him and saying, 'Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us.' But the other rebuked him, saying, 'Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong.' And he said, 'Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.' And he said to him, 'Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise.'" There's three things I want us to look at this morning. First of all, I want us to look at the weight of debt. The weight of debt. Our passage opens up here today where when we're confronted with the scene where Jesus is being nailed to the cross at Golgotha. In other words, the place of the skull. That's what that means. Now, the immense weight of that wooden cross symbolizes not only the physical suffering that Jesus endured, but also the burden of humanity's sin and debt. You see, the burden that Jesus bore that day when he walked down the Via Dolorosa that Brother Dennis sang about last week, when he walked down that street of Jerusalem, it's 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry, but anyhow, when he walked down that street with that heavy cross, it wasn't just the burden of a physical wooden cross that he was bearing, but he was bearing literally the sin burden of the entire world. Now, how many of us in this room at